today on the Parent Equation, I'm very, very happy to have Rachel Schofield with me. Rachel is a career coach and author of the Career Change Guide, available to buy now. Welcome, Rachel.
Thanks, Aisha. It's great to be with you.
So today we are going to talk about portfolio careers. And the reason being, I think what I've seen, certainly with clients that are coming through to me recently, is there's this, I suppose, fear of everything happening in the world, markets, economies, job market at the moment, is that maybe I should have some alternative options to my potentially long-term career that I've had to give me some security, give me variety, and have other things to dip into as time goes on, if necessary. But I think we spoke about earlier, portfolio career can mean so many different things. So what does it mean to you, do you think?
Yeah, and that's so interesting that as a starting point, the way you're experiencing it with your clients is sometimes from a position of, the world is changing, AI is coming in, maybe our jobs are going to vary, so I need some future proofing. I need to have more than one to go. And you're right, we're seeing that sense of, let me think through my options and make sure I've got some. But also, I think portfolio careers come from a desire that I see increasingly in my clients as well, to not be locked in to one pathway, that actually people say, I'm a diverse person. I have diverse interests and things that light me up. And actually, I quite like to play to all of them. I don't want to have to pick. So I think portfolio careers, it just goes to show, encompass all sides of a debate about, our working identity. And I guess a portfolio career is what you make it. Sometimes people with portfolio careers are called slashers because they have all the slashers. Like, I'm a coach / writer / facilitator, or I'm a graphic designer / artist / trainer. It's that thing of, can I have a combination in my work, sometimes of things that seem to sit together quite closely, that I express in different ways, and sometimes things that seem to have nothing to do with each other. And that's the joy of it, that a portfolio career is your chance to really take ownership and shape your career in a way that excites you, plays to your strengths, or alternatively future-proofs you, gives you some kind of security and a sense of being able to change your direction if you want to.
It feels like it might also be a generational thing. Because I know certainly my parents' generation, you were in a career, you picked your career after school, after university, whatever it was, and that was what you were going to do for the rest of your life until you retired, and that was kind of it. And there's almost no permission given that you would dare to change your career path or try something different or add something else in. But now it seems that there is that permission to actually say, I don't want to stay in this career for 25, 30 years. There are other options out there for me, and I am a diverse person who has diverse needs and interests. So I suppose I wonder whether, again, with your experience with clients, do you have any examples of where maybe there's a sort of slightly generational viewpoint of actually one should stay in what one is doing versus actually I want to be a bit freer with all this?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I was looking actually at some of the stats, and they were back from 2021, but the Department for Education here in the UK did a survey and found that 2/3 of people were taking on multiple jobs or looking to do so. And what was interesting there, whether that was less generational, but a lot of that was to do with the pandemic and the COVID. And those stats also showed that 37% more people have portfolio careers than before the pandemic. So on the one hand, we're seeing the influence perhaps of the pandemic and the way that we're being asked to work and that impact on our careers. But you're right, I think generationally, there's been a shift in the way we work generally, that you're not on a ladder anymore. You don't start at the bottom and work up and never step off your ladder, that actually you're on a journey that might take you down lots of different pathways. So do I see it just, funnily enough, the majority of my clients are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and I'm seeing this showing up with them as well. So I think you're right. I think probably the older generation were not so used to this idea, but it spread quite well. And I think people are seeing it of all ages as an opportunity to do something a bit different and break away from the ladder-like structure of careers.
Yeah. So what do you think the benefits might be? So obviously, as coaches, we would extol the benefits of any change, any opportunity, any sort of creative thinking. But when we put it in sort of more practical terms for people, what could be the genuine benefits of considering having a portfolio career?
Yeah, I think there are lots of different ones, and they come from different places, a bit like where we started. So I think on the one hand, you can combine different sides of yourself. You can kind of hold two identities. So perhaps sometimes people have a portfolio career because they do one thing that's quite traditional. So, you know, you're an accountant for 3 days a week. And for the other two, you get to go and, you know, draw manga comics or whatever it is. So there's a sense of it gives you that opportunity to explore the fullness of yourself and your interests. I think for some people, it's about their balance in their life. They have a core part of their work that they know has a very steady income. It's probably an employed form of work, but then they want to have something that they can have a little bit more control over. So a couple of days a week, they do freelance work, which of course they can up or down as they like, and set the hours that they want, things like that. So that's definitely an advantage. I think one of the joys of it is actually you can use it as a transition. So it allows you to start exploring an avenue or doing some training or doing some volunteering alongside something that remains constant and gives you that steady source of income while you're thinking, would I like to move over into this thing? So sometimes a portfolio career is a period of time, a transition period, that actually ends up back with a firm fixed career, but it's allowed you to explore both. Because of course I work a lot in the career change space, and people get very panicky for obvious reasons about, well, I can't just jack everything in and start my whole new career the next day. So why not experiment and take a period of time where you're holding two careers at once? So there's lots of good things about it. I think people talk a lot about the fact, yes, it maybe gives you more freedom, more autonomy, more control over the way that you shape your week. And as we discussed, perhaps it keeps you learning and growing. It keeps you expanding your skill set in new things that hopefully give you a set of skills that will carry you forward. Should one part of your portfolio start to flag, or the industry changes, or AI comes in and the job shifts, then actually you're ready because you've got another area to pull on. So lots of good things about it.
Yeah, and actually the example, well, the other episode in this podcast series with one of the parents called Lee, his portfolio career is exactly your first example. So traditional marketing role for a long time, successfully. And now alongside freelance marketing, he also is a qualified personal trainer, so runs that as a side business. And also over the summer was de-rigging and rigging, if that's the right word, festival sites, because he loves music, he loves being in that kind of environment. And so actually thought that this is something I love being part of, so why can't I do a bit of that as well? And it was just a why not?
Yeah, you know? And a couple of examples to add to that, because it's often nice for people to anchor it, isn't it, in something real. So a couple of case studies that I feature in my book. One is very much like that. It was a police officer. Her name's Jeanette. She's in her 40s. She, again, it was slightly a transition thing as well, but she knew that she's going to have to retire when she gets to 50, because that's the setup in the police force. And she thought, well, I could just go back into sort of civilian type policing. You know, there are the civilians in the police force where you can do it until you're older. But she thought, there's a part of me that's quite creative. So what she started to do was become a furniture designer. She started very simply. It was more of a side hustle than a full portfolio when it started, because she just went on eBay and bought a sideboard. I think she paid 40 quid for it. Spent a long time, a lot of love and energy doing it up and painting it and decorating it and sort of redesigning some of it. Sold it for £500, I think Etsy or one of the. And there was the birth of a career. And of course, it was a slow burn. But there she is. She's part police officer with a specialism in fraud, I think it was, and part creative furniture designer. And she's sitting those together for a while. But the idea is that when retirement comes around, she's already got something that she's got ready to run. Similarly, another example in my book, Fiona is a graphic designer. And this is interesting because what she saw is that the job changed. Said, well, when I first started graphic design, it was really hands-on. We did a lot of sort of model making and things. She said more and more it became very computerized. And she said, it's great because it's a source of income, but I've lost the bit that I love. I've lost the hands-on bit of graphic design as technology has moved on. So she now works part-time, and increasingly she's hoping to up that amount of time. Stone carver. She does beautiful lettering, handcrafted lettering on stone, whether that's headstones or plaques or commemorative things or gifts for people. and allowing her to have the money she needs from graphic design, but also to pull in that really that tactile experience of creating. That's what she really loves. So people do it for all kinds of reasons. That's the joy of it. You can sort of use it to whatever end you want and shape it in whatever way.
My red flag, if you like, thinking about it from a client point of view, if you like, is how the hell do I start thinking about what I want to do? So stone carving sounds amazing. Where does that come from? I suppose as a thought process, when you start with a blank piece of paper and think, I know I want something else alongside my day job, that could be anything.
Yeah.
So where do you start with that thought process?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that, you know, as someone who works in the career change space, which maybe portfolios are not, comes up a lot when people come say, I don't have any ideas. There are various places you can look, and I think just bringing your curiosity to your own life is a huge starting point. We know in coaching that the curiosity is a brilliant thing to have and to adopt. So you might well go looking in your interests. And we get very lazy here, and we sort of do the whole follow your passion, and people well, I don't have a passion, or if I do like cooking, I don't want to, you know, open a restaurant. So bigger. But I still think that there is definitely something there about people's interests. So in the case of Fiona, my graphic designer, you know, she was already doing classes and courses in her own time around stone carving and that sort of thing. And she just started trying. She didn't start that thinking, I'm going to make a career out of it, but she just lent into that. And then found someone who commissioned her to do something. So sometimes it's around that. Sometimes it's around looking at the work that you're doing and trying to sort of work out which bits of it do I really like. Because sometimes the job you've got, you just think, actually, if I could lean more into that bit, if I could create that either into my own little freelance bit that I offer, or I could reversion it into a different industry, sometimes that can give you a lot of clues. So you know, what you're good at, what you enjoy, what your interests are, what people ask you to help them with. Sometimes you notice that, well, people always come to me, whether that's professionally or in my personal life, saying, can you help with this? You know all about, you know, schools and which are the best schools around here that I should be, and how I get through that blimmin' application. And suddenly think, could that be a thing?
Yeah.
So it's just about noticing what sparks your energy and your curiosity, noticing what you're good at, noticing where you have ideas that you think, could that be something? And with any idea, it's you're going to have to go through that testing process. That what starts as a kind of little spark, you're going to have to decide, does it have legs? Does it really hold my attention? Could it really turn into something that people would pay me for? And all of those kind of things.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I came from with my coaching. Is that I similarly to you, what you're saying there is the role I was doing in marketing. I actually realized that I spent the time I was spending in my 9 to 5, 80% was coaching people. And I started to tune into what am I actually doing every day in this role. Not as much marketing as I probably should be, and a lot more coaching. And so that started the seed of, is this something I could do, etc. And then obviously, as you say, you build that over time. This obviously, again, questions people can say, is there a risk to this? So we kind of find something we want to do, and maybe easier with flexible working nowadays, again, post-pandemic, where maybe we can carve out a bit of time during the week to focus on something else. But I suppose what are going to be the biggest risks to actually embarking on this portfolio career vision?
Yeah. Is it risks or is it challenges? Let me split those two, because I think there are some challenges. But the risks, in a way, I'd be tempted, and not to be glib about this, but to say the joy of a portfolio career, the joy of building something alongside, actually de-risks it a little bit. I think the risk when making changes to say, right, next Tuesday, I'm not going to be a lawyer anymore. I'm going to teach people graffiti art. And you're like, well, at the moment, you're earning, you know, X 100K. And how are you know, that's risky. That the kind of throwing it all in and starting without having tested. I think with portfolio careers, that risk is actually minimized, because you're saying, well, I'll stick with what I'm doing, the solid thing that's tried and tested, and maybe I'll take one day a week out of that. I'll see if I can, you know, negotiate with my current workplace and change the way I work, so I can just introduce something and start to just see if it works. I think there are perhaps risks once you get up and going, that yes, the joy of, oh, look, I do lots of different things, how lovely and varied for me and how thrilling. Of course, where do the boundaries sit around the different bits? Because it can be easy to think, well, I'm going to do 3 days of this and 2 days of that. But of course, what happens when the clients that you wanted on a Thursday or Friday say, could you see me on a Monday? And then you say, oh, yes, of course, that's fine. And then you're suddenly, you're overwhelmed. Everything's blending together. So I think that probably, whether that's a risk, it's certainly a challenge to think, well, how much time do I want to give each of these things? You know, how much money do I need to make from each of these things? How can I be as boundaried as possible, as boundaried as I need to be? So that can be a challenge. And another challenge, I think, well, maybe it's a risk as well, is although I think we are seeing the rise of the portfolio career, sometimes it is a difficult identity to hold. Internally, partly because you're like, well, what am I? And what do I, when people say, so what do you do? And you're sort of like, well, sometimes I de-rig festivals and sometimes I do something totally different. Well, so there's a risk sometimes that people don't get you. That can be hard for you because you sort of think, oh, I'm not very good at explaining this. And how do I make it clear that, you know, I'm an organist, but I also, you know, I'm a head of HR, but I play for people's weddings, or, you know, I don't make sense. So that can be challenging, but I think there is a risk perhaps that if you don't get your messaging right, that externally as well, maybe that doesn't play brilliantly if you can't explain why. Particularly if you then at some point want to major back in on one of the things, you know, you want to be clear that you can explain the journey and why you've spent, you know, 2 days a week for the last 6 years, you know, redesigning people's kitchens when you're actually, you know, something totally different. You know, you work in publishing and they'd be like, oh. So perhaps that's a risk, is does the world understand you? But that can again be minimized by really strong messaging, a kind of powerful narrative about who you are, why you do what you do, and if necessary, it's not always necessary, how the two things sit together and complement each other and re-emphasize the skill sets that you've got.
What really struck me with that is it reminds me of mums going back to work. So you talk about identity in that, and you're talking about confidence to actually say, this is who I am now, this is my career and I'm behind it. So that's my strong message. And with mums going back to work and that identity shift of having been with your child, you know, potentially for 6, 9, 12 months, and then transitioning back with a new identity as now an employee and a professional persona, and having to then, I suppose, just deal with what conflicts that may bring up for you and what identity do you now have as a working parent. And also that confidence of going back to a workplace, reasserting yourself, saying, I'm back, I know what I'm doing, I back myself with my career, etc. So it seems like almost a bit of a parallel between those two, I suppose, transitions, because they're both transitions, aren't they, in different ways. So a portfolio career is a transition from your perhaps well-trodden path that you're used to, comfort zone, all those kind of things, transitioning into a way of working that can be quite different and exciting, but daunting at the same time. Yeah,
I totally agree. And I think, again, not that all portfolio careers are the same, but I think one of the common things that we see is people go from an employment, you know, being employed, to becoming freelance in some way. So they perhaps set themselves up as a consultant, and again, that can require a different skill set as well. So on the one, you've got your identity challenges going on, and also suddenly you're like, oh, I have to do my own books, or I have to write this proposal for this client, or I have to go and do some marketing, or I have to do my own website. You know, if you've been employed all the time and someone says, here's your job for the day, Rachel, can you just get on and do it? And here, this is the client, and this is when you're going to meet them, and this is the template that you fill in, and suddenly you're like, oh, you know, I've got to do all of that stuff. So and as an adult, we're not always great at embracing new things that we're not familiar with. We can have sudden sense of that kind of imposterism of, gosh, I don't know what I'm doing. And if you're, you know, in your 30s or 40s or 50s, to not know what you're doing feels quite challenging. You suddenly think, oh, I thought I just brought my same skills and just went freelance, but there's a whole other load of things I have to be able to do as a freelancer or whatever it is that I'm not familiar with. So you're right. I think the mind can play tricks, and any transitions offer new challenges, which are practical and a kind of emotional and mental level throw up some things for us to wrestle with.
I suppose it has to be outcome based, doesn't it? So if you are going into a portfolio career context with a very clear view as to why you want that portfolio career, what it's going to offer you, we talked about the benefits, what it's going to offer me, why I'm doing it, so you have a real purpose to this endeavor, then presumably, hopefully, some of those challenges you come up against, the imposter, the do I have the right skills for these additional parts of my job, hopefully will be manageable, because you know that by getting through those challenges, you are still heading towards actually that purpose you had in the first place.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Good old Simon Sinek and his, your why. Yeah, I think if you can, because there will be moments when you feel a bit wobbly, or one identity starts to challenge the other, or you think, how much do I want to do of this one and how much do I want to do of that one? Yeah, it's to say, well, what does each of these give me? Why am I doing this? And sometimes you might not know immediately because you're just experimenting, but ultimately knowing that, well, I want to lean into this artistic side of myself because I find it fulfills me. I enjoy that creativity. It gives me flow. It helps me relax in contrast to my other role. And that's what I want from it. So that needs to be my guiding principle. I don't want it to become stressful. I want it to be a release. Or similarly, I want to do this because it gives me the freedom and more control of my time that my other work doesn't give me. And keeping those in mind, because of course, all the time that you're playing and holding these different roles, the water can get muddied. And I think you're right. Knowing what it is you want from each element can help you put some of those boundaries in place and stay focused when you get to the muddly bits where you feel a bit like, oh gosh, this is scary.
Yeah, I think also, especially if you have to convey this message to employers, because maybe you want more flexible working to follow these pursuits. Obviously, family setups need to be discussed. What's the scenario if I do this? How does that affect family income? How does that affect logistics, etc., with kids? So I think also having that confidence to, as you said before, having a really clear message as to why you're doing this, so that you can have much more confident conversations with those people that need to support or ease your path through it.
Yeah, you're right. So this is not normally a solitary process, is it, for us, if we've got caring responsibilities or partners and things, that it's part of a wider discussion. Having somebody to champion that with you, maybe even to practice how you talk about it, but also to have the very practical conversations about, well, what does this do with my income or our income as a couple or as a family unit? What can be very interesting as well is I always think these sort of career changes or moves into portfolio career are sort of contagious. I have a number of clients who come to me, and the starting point is I'm thinking about a career change. And then when we start chatting, I'll be like, so tell me a little bit more about you. Do you have family? And suddenly they say, well, yes, my husband or my partner or my wife. Yeah, they're also thinking about whether they might want to bring their hours down because they're totally stressed and burnt. And suddenly it becomes a much bigger process. So it can open up some powerful conversations, but ones that need proper thought and consideration.
I think maybe scaling it back. We've talked a lot about the sort of not the drastic options, but you could be a personal trainer and a festival rigger, or an organist and a police person, all these different things. But I think, as you referred to at the beginning, you can create a sense of portfolio within your existing career and role, and having different strings to your bow.
I think so. And going back to that thing we were saying, where you said you realized that it was the speaking to people part of your marketing role that you really liked. Now that led you in a way to fully train as a coach, but sometimes you just think, well, can I almost create a portfolio within my organization where I offer to head up a certain project once in a while, even if it's something that only comes around every 6 months, you think, well, I want to throw my hat in the ring for that because that feeds a different part of me. That's the really creative energy. Or there's some event that comes around every year and you think, well, I'd like to get involved in that. It wouldn't be my full day job. Or similarly, these opportunities for secondments or attachments, or to cover somebody's maternity leave, that actually then you maybe can play a little bit with your identity and lean into things without going the full sort of, right, I'm going down to 3 days a week and I'm setting up my own business 2 days a week. And similarly, the tiniest ways to start, if you're not within your own organization, but thinking, well, could I make something work? Could I be, a wedding photographer on the side because I love wedding photography? Well, just set yourself the task to say, I'm going to find one friend of mine and offer to photograph their wedding or go and do their baby shower or whatever it is. You don't have to start out with some massive business plan and sort of a totally worked out vision of how it's going to function. And you don't have to go straight into HR in your job and start discussing flexible working and can I go down to compressed hours and you just think, let me just put a little toe in the water before I designed my website and got business cards, to just say, could I get one lovely set of wedding photographs and see if I enjoyed it and see whether other people are like, oh, these are good. Might you do my wedding? You know, these things can be a really slow burn.
Yeah. I'll let you know a secret. I still haven't got a business plan.
Me neither.
3 or 4 years later, still winging it.
Right. We need to find a business. There must be a business consultant out there who's part of their portfolio is to help
coaches sort themselves out. So, Rachel, before we wrap up, I suppose we've talked about various different risks, benefits, considerations, etc. What would be, I suppose, your biggest 1, 2, or 3 takeaways for people who are thinking, I'm ready to make a change of some kind? It might not be as drastic as a whole business change, but even within the role, how do I start thinking about the portfolio career options? What would the first, I suppose, consideration be for those people?
I think it comes down again to thinking, first of all, think of it as an experiment. You're not trying to make a decision. You're just trying to test out some ideas. So I think the starting small is really important, and thinking I'm just going to see if this could potentially work. So that often starts with just something as a side hustle, something you do on a Saturday, looking for one client who'd take you on to do their website as a freelancer, as opposed to your normal kind of graphic design. So starting small, testing your ideas. I think as well, realizing that it's not a set process. I mean, the joy of the portfolio career is that it can wax and wane. So you don't necessarily have to say, well, I'm definitely going to do 3 days of this and 2 days of that, and then think, oh, this isn't working. Oh dear, I've made a mistake. Well, no, maybe you haven't. Maybe actually you just need to kind of make a subtle adjustment, that this is a process, I think, as well, that it will keep evolving. You can iterate time and time again. Same with any career change. People panic because they think, I'm making a decision, it must be the wrong one, therefore I will do nothing. Like, well, make a start, see how it feels, and if the kind of balance that you've got of 50-50 doesn't work, then you can rework that. So I think holding it loosely to begin with, even though of course we've said, you know, you don't want to be so casual that you don't know how you're going to pay your mortgage. And I think finally, maybe thinking about that point we made before, what do you want from each part, so that you don't get so in a mess with what am I doing this for, that you clear this will give me X, these are some of the outcomes I want. And for some people that will be very measurable. You know, I need this to give me this much income, or I need this in order to, you know, fund my kids through uni or whatever it is. But sometimes it's much more about, this will give me an outlet for what particular part of my personality, and I really want to honor that. This will meet my values of adventure and fun that don't get met when I'm, you know, the head of HR or whatever it is. No offense, I'm sure that's, you know, it's sort of getting clear on what's it all about. What are the values and the underlying desires that I want to meet in these. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And as I mentioned at the beginning, your book, The Career Change Guide, has all of this sort of and more for those, I suppose, also not just, again, drastic career change, but just the thinking process behind even a lower level portfolio career can all be found in there. And where else can people find you if they want to get a bit more about info?
People can find me on LinkedIn, Rachel Schofield, or my website is www.rachelschofield.co.uk, or I'm on Instagram, although not very much at the moment, but I should be more. My Instagram handle is @reworkyourlife, all one word, rework your life. And you're right, sometimes these things feel big and scary, but you know, occasionally, in fact, quite regularly, even a small tweak, even just connecting with what do I want and from my career, can lead to enough change to really make a big difference and move the needle, whether that ends up being a huge kind of complex, I'm a this/this/this, or just some small tweaks that you think, I've got rid of that bit that I don't like, and I'm leaning into the stuff that brings me joy.
Yeah, just some time to reflect, take stock, which we don't do often enough, I would suggest. Thank you so much, Rachel. Thank you for your time today.
Absolute pleasure. Always great talking to you.